Very warm welcome, literally a warm welcome here at Stroom tonight. I'm Patrick van der Heijden. I'm your host for tonight, although I won't do all the talking, of course. Very warm welcome for the 6th edition this year of The Night's Move. The Night's Move is a series of encounters with inspiring and sometimes radical thinkers and doers organized by Stroom, the Nationale Toneel, the National Theatre, and the International Center of Civic Hacks. It's very easy this evening. We have a guest, Mulholland. Very glad that we have him over tonight. After now, well, maybe 3/4 of an hour, I'll be joining the conversation, and of course, you are very welcome to join it as well. This is the last one of this year's series. Next week we'll be having our meeting for making new plans for next year. So please keep in touch through Facebook for all the next editions. I'm going to give the floor to Mulholland. Here he is.
Thank you. Before I was at Glasgow University's composer in residence, I was a research fellow in the psychology department at Glasgow Caledonian University, and that brief was to research psychogeography. Nothing to do with music at that point. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you a little film we put together as a promo for the BBC. And here's. That's not it. That's not it. Yeah. Can someone help me with this, please? This wasn't right. Oh, there should be a phone.
Memory sleeps in the blood. The sinews, the neurons, old maps reinterpreted on modern streets become time machines. History, memory, geography and cartography entwined and recurring. Simply by going for a walk, you conduct a geographical rite that can bend time. Just wandering around gives you a sense of otherness, of invisibility. You become an observer. The sedimentary nature of cities allows us to occasionally glimpse the past from semiotic clues presented to us from being in this other state. Patterns of continuity and coincidence resonate as a weird Mori effect, and the clues become the signs and signifiers of an historical continuum. This neglected inheritance reveals hidden courtyards, alleyways, stairwells, shops, gods, apotropaic scratchings, tunnels, lost areas just off the main drag, connecting to the past by a kind of alchemical osmosis. When the poet and musician Patti Smith was asked how she prepared for gigs, she said she usually roamed the streets, wandered around. What Patti does is to continue a great tradition that regarded walking as an integral part of the creative process, as did Coleridge, Rousseau, J.S. Bach, Einstein, Kierkegaard, C.S. Lewis. Wordsworth averaged 10 miles a day, while Immanuel Kant's constitutionals were so regular that his neighbours literally set their clocks by them. In 1909, Charles Hurst walks from Manchester to the Midlands, planting acorns along the route in an attempt to curtail the advance of the Industrial Revolution. As the journey proceeds, he realises that what he's actually doing is commenting on the good and bad in England. At 79 Renfield Street in Glasgow, a plaque commemorates the 19th century essayist and opium eater Thomas de Quincey's brief stay in the city. The fact that the actual building where he lived was demolished over 100 years ago doesn't matter. What the plaque celebrates is the notion that somewhere within the three-dimensional space, the idea of De Quincey's rooms still exists. Old stones conspiring to create a space outside time. The London of 1665 is navigated not by maps, but by trial and error, by memory and by chance. The streets, passageways and courts are constantly rearranging their significance as potential escape routes as the plague spreads. If we can decipher the clues, we can interpret the city and try to understand it.
Can I just help again, please? All the slides have just disappeared. Oh, hang on, here now. Right. No, come on. Right. Sound shapes our perception of the world, it always has. In 2008, archaeologists discovered swan and vulture bone flutes in the Swabian Jura caves in southern Germany. They were Neolithic, they dated between 35,000 and 45,000 years ago. Chiming flints and stone percussion were found in the Trois Fèvres caves in France. Sound has always acted as a sympathetic magic at that time. Our ancestors, in replicating the sounds of nature, animal cries, thunder, bird song, wind through trees, lightning, etc., helped it become part of our cultural DNA, and in so contributed to the development of our non-verbal communication. The manipulating of sound, for me, is a type of magic, and by reconfiguring it, we can achieve changes in perception. I'll let you hear some of the wind flutes now. Oh, sorry, that was a one flute. And it's not very long, but sorry. When I was, one of the times I was down in Cambridge, I was in the music department, and the head of the music department played me some sounds, and they were from flints that they'd found in the Trois Fèvres caves in France, and they were Neolithic. And they were in a museum in Paris, and they had laid them out as tools. Fortunately, there was a music PhD student at Cambridge who asked if she could hear them. And they asked why, and she said, I've got a theory that they could have been used in ritual. So they got the flints out for her. And there was hardly any marks on them. And she asked to see photographs of the find. And they were found right at the end of a cave system, in a hall without semicircle, and they were placed in the wall, going from the smallest up to the biggest. And of course she was right. The museum curator got it completely wrong. And when those flints were played, pardon me, in that space, they resonated around, and again, like the flute, they changed people's perception. Sound in a particular place. So this goes way back to, some Mesolithic flutes. So let's see. What we did was we got a recording of the original experiment they did and manipulated it. I hope. So again, it's taking something that was a found sound, if you like, and then changing it. And by changing it, we can help but put our own take on it. So this now becomes a sound that would have been heard thousands of years ago is now actually going to be on my next record. So it's this constant moving. The fact that nothing like that is dead, and the fact of sound changing matter. I recently discovered this. I'm also a research fellow in our physics department in Glasgow, and Mark, our technician, is great. Every time I go into his room, he always knows that if there's any piece of equipment being thrown out, he can always throw it in my direction. And the recent thing that he gave me was, and this is going to sound rude, but it's a vibrator, and it's not steady. No, it's a little drum, and it vibrates at different frequencies. And what it was for was you put electricity through it, and it vibrates at different frequencies, and you lay a flat metal plate on it. And depending on the frequencies, when you put sand or salt on it, these are the shapes it throws up. So there's a definite correlation between frequency, vibration, and shape. I only discovered this a couple of weeks ago, and we're going to be doing more experiments. I am bringing this stuff home, Michelle, so apologies. It's my wife over there. Right, next. Right, I probably should have given you a nude warning there. Right, let's see. That's me. And this is my friend Paul. This is taken in August 1972, I think it was. I think I'll give the notes of this. So all of this mania for sound was really started by a friend here. We were obsessed, absolutely obsessed with music. Paul was a couple of years older than me, and he would always find out the great records and invite me down to his house. One of the distinctive moments for me to become a musician was one Saturday morning. Paul phoned me and he said, "I got this record last night, you've got to hear it, let's get down here now." And so I got on my bike, that's the bike there, and cycled down to Paul's parents' house, and he had just bought the first Pink Floyd album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn. And we sat there, and his mum made tea and biscuits for us, and we were listening to the whole record, then listened to it again. And I think it was probably at that time, I don't know if you're aware of the record, but the production in it, there were a lot of little strange noises going on behind. I mean, fantastic songs, but the production was really, really out of this world. It was an incredible record. So that was August. That Christmas, we both got little mono tape recorders with the handheld mic. And again, one of the great things about Paul was he had friends at school who formed a group called Lodestone, and they were older than him, and they were quite experimental. Now this would be, early 70s, and he came in one day with a tape loop, which I'll show you. Steady. Oh, hang on. This is a tape loop. I'm sure most of you know what they're like. And it was just this sound of ball bearings rolling down a drain pipe, just going round and round. And we turned the tape over, and it was backward sound. So that was it. We were absolutely hooked on the idea of tape loops. So what happened was, this was the area about 200 yards behind my house, and just along the road from Paul, and it was horrible, really. I love this thing. In here was where they dismantled trains. As you can see, they're all just about to be broken up. And further along this way was the railway went right in here. So you can imagine it was this massive industrial plant that would be incredibly noisy. Our house would actually shake when they were doing the really heavy stuff. And we didn't want to replicate the kind of weird stuff that Lodestone were doing. They made tape loops from radio static and the humming of amplifiers and things. So we thought, we've got to find our own thing. So this is the kind of thing that unfortunately, this isn't one of our tapes. I don't know where they went. But this was the type of thing that we would record and turn into tape loops. And so Paul would make one loop out of maybe a minute recording. I would do another, and then we'd play the two loops at the same time. So that would make a third sound, and then we'd record that, and it just went on and on and on. And it was, for us, it was absolutely the most normal thing in the world to do. For other people that knew us, maybe it wasn't such a normal thing. They were doing proper things like chasing girls and stuff like that. Now the thing is, this industrial area was on one side of a lane that really went nowhere, but on the other side of the lane was this extremely bucolic area. It was we had homemade football pitches in it. There was abandoned railway tunnels. There was Second World War air raid shelters that had been built for the railway workers. So we would get into these places, into the tunnels, into these lost areas, these forgotten places, neglected, and we would record. I mean, I remember this type of thing was incredible because they'd usually be flooded, so you would get a great reverb off them, and would make all this. Maybe it's pre-throbbing gristle industrial noise. I don't want to claim I invented industrial music. I've already been claimed, someone at another university claimed I invented techno. I didn't. So we're going to go forward. So this was very much that was very much our playground, and the real starting of listening, of really kind of deep listening to what was around us. But also I think what we were doing, although we didn't realise at that time, what we were doing was really, we were kind of bringing forth a memory of the place. And the reason all this stuff came back to me was I was asked to give a talk at the Alchemical Conference in Cambridge, and I was very, very touched because when the round robin came round, the email came round inviting papers, I was down as one of the people that could influence, which I was really, really touched by. So I called them, I said, look, if you want me to talk, I'd love to. And they said, fantastic, talk about whatever you like. And I said, right, okay, that's a big field. So they said, right, there was James Riley, who's a fellow from Girton, said, just tell us how you started. And I had to go back and back and back. And this is this kind of treasure trove of found sound, of industrial sound, of memory, of place. I mean, all the stuff that is I've shown photographs of, that's mostly away now. Nature has kind of reclaimed it, which again is interesting. These are 4 of my records, and even putting this talk together tonight, I've kind of realised things. This is the one that's literally out about a week ago. This one came out the end of 2 years ago, at the end of 2014. And this one is very much based on the work I did at the university. This is mostly string quartets, but again, very much based on place and memory. The music that was playing over the film is from Norwood Variations. And what that is, where I grew up in Glasgow in the East End, it was quite an extended family. So we all lived near each other. And one day I plotted where all the houses were, where my school was, things like that. And I took the dots and I put them onto music staves and played them. And that was the starting point of getting the string quartet thing going. Again, that was a kind of revelation of just thinking outside the box. Let's see. As I was saying to someone earlier on, this album eventually came out on the Ghost Box label. I brought it out myself in 2001, and what happened was I was not doing any music at all, and I was in a newsagent's with my daughter, who was 5, and she was looking for a comic. And I don't know if any of you have ever been in a newsagent with a 5-year-old looking for a comic, but it takes a long time. And I picked up a copy of The Wire magazine, and I opened it at random, and the first thing I saw was Mulholland sales at Hobbs Lane. and it was about this new label that was starting called Ghostbox. And everything I read about them, they were into hauntology, they were into public information films, sounded really interesting, and the graphics for the label were fantastic as well. So I got their email, and I just sent an email off to Jim Jupp, who runs the label, and I said, look, I feel as though I've handed the baton on now. I'm really touched. This is, good luck with the label, it looks great. And that was all I wanted to do. Jim emailed me back within an hour and said, can we re-release it? Because this album was our touchstone for starting our label. So I said, sure, no problem, as long as Julian House does the artwork, which he did. And this album I got interviewed when this one came out again. I was interviewed, and the journalist said to me, yeah, you've done a few albums before this, but when this one came out, you must have known this was going to channel into all the psychogeographical writing, Ian Sinclair. It was going to bring in hauntology and memory of place. And I was like, no, it was just the next record. It wasn't. I didn't sit down, with bills to pay. You just do your job. But somehow this record it's never been out of print since Ghostbox have released it, and it's absolutely steeped in those things. And the reason I found that out was because when it came out originally, a journalist said to me, oh, I really like the record, how long have you been into psychogeography? And I said, what's that? I've never heard of it. And I was absolutely genuine, and he sent me basically a reading list and a couple of articles. And the first book in the reading list was Lights Out for the Territory by Ian Sinclair. And I was about 4 pages into it, and I thought, I've been doing this all my life. I just didn't realise it was, I'd vaguely heard of the Situationists through Malcolm McLaren and the Sex Pistols, but that was all. That's all I'd heard. So that one it's been a very good record for me, and it's been written about in Oxford University Press, and yeah, I'm really pleased I did it. And this one is the cover for a record that I recorded 100 foot below ground in a nuclear command centre in Scotland. So again, even placing all these records the other day to photograph the covers, every one of them in their own way have been connected with place, memory, how sound affects you, and I'm very pleased that they're not all the same kind of genre. There's music concrete. There's this one is recordings of the electromagnetic field on top of a Neolithic burial chamber, which came about because I was doing some music for our archaeology department. So the idea of working in archaeology and then geography and then astrophysics all at the same time. I'm just very, very blessed because I can just easily see the connections between these things. When I did some music for the geography department, and when it was performed, the head of the astronomy department was there, and he said, could you come and do something for us? But in order to get funding, we've got to prove a connection between psychogeography and astronomy, and that's impossible. And I said, no, it's not. So John P. Nichol, who was the chief astronomer at Glasgow in the 1840s, was a great friend of Thomas de Quincey, who's a progenitor of psychogeography. So I did music for them. But you wouldn't immediately think there would be a connection between these things, but I find them. Let's see, what else we got here? Oh, this is another thing. A few weeks ago, I'm fairly obsessed with things subterranean, and I've always wanted to get into the Glasgow Underground, the subway that goes round. That is nothing like the London Underground, it's just 20 stations or something. And it's a loop, 2 loops again. So we have a very, very good press officer at the university, so I always fire ideas to her. And the Glasgow Underground, one of their anniversaries is coming up. So basically they said to her, look, we've got this guy that does kind of strange stuff. He'd like to come down and record the sound of the tunnels, obviously when the trains aren't running. So their press officer got back to me and said, look, this is really interesting, but would you rather not come and record the sound of our ghost station? So, here it is, Merkland Street. What happened, this is Merkland Street 1927, And it was bombed during the war, and it was closed for a year. And then in the late 70s, they built another station 100 yards down the line called Partick, and it joins up with the overground train. So this space is, that's it now. So this area, this area was the base of the platform, and so the platform would have been, in fact I think this cage thing they've erected is more or less where the platform was. So went down there a couple of months ago and recorded. This is what it said. But again, it wasn't just a field recording, it was taking the recordings away and doing something with it. Tunnels at night, there will be no sounds. But this is all the work that's done to maintain the railway, and you hear announcements from the different stations, even when you're under there. And there's 2 tunnels, and between them there's little conduits that you have to crawl through, and there's incredibly, it's very, very dry in these tunnels. And in between them is where all the water collects. So that's mixed in with it as well. And in the station there's still painted on adverts for department stores. That's, I'm assuming, I think most people agree it's an armchair. But all the lettering for the shop is faded away, and the paint started to run here. But the interesting thing about this kind of stuff is the fella that was showing us around walks around every other night, and he's been doing it for years, and he's never noticed this. And that's another thing about, it's like, where was this there? So again, it's looking at things that are all around you, but there's always something a bit different if you manage to, like psychogeography, if you manage to get into this other way of looking. And what I always say to students is, if you go out on a walk and it's a psychogeographical walk, you may start to get messages from overhearing people's conversations, or car number plates or old shop signs, and don't take too much into it. Just enjoy the experience and go home and do the dishes or take the dog out, because if you were to be very easily seduced by that, you could be in a very, very difficult place. Some people have gone pretty mad, to be honest. This is the brand new album. This is where it was recorded at Cairnpapel Hill in West Lothian. Now, this here is the burial mound. This is actually on top of the highest hill there. The pop star Julian Cope, who wrote a book about standing stone circles and mounds, says that Cairnpapel was the highest henge he ever did attend. So there's a stone circle around it. It's been used in Neolithic time and Mesolithic, Iron Age, all the way up, and it was, I think it stopped using it about 1,000 years ago. And the story goes, if you stand here on a clear day, you can see as far as Bass Rock, which is off the east coast, and Arran, which is off the west coast. We didn't, because it was cloudy, obviously. So I'll play some of this. That's the actual recordings we were doing. This is the VLF receiver that picked up the Earth's magnetic field, and it was loaned to me by the astronomy department. So when I finished this record, I gave it to the head of the astronomy department, and he said, "What have you done? What have you done with these tapes? The electromagnetic field doesn't sound like this." And I said, "Well, if you just want a document, there's no point giving it to me, because I'll go, stretch it and turn it around." So the thing is, I got it. This is a little cassette player. And I definitely wanted to get it onto cassette, which I'll come to in a minute about the invention of magnetic tape. So we had quite a bit of that type of phasing sound, and there was one of the tracks that we did, we slowed everything right down, and one of the tracks we started to hear voices in it. Now there's a thing in psychology that if you don't understand what it is, your brain will fill in the blanks, but we were starting to hear things. And the head of astronomy said, well, if you slow the tapes down, you're going to bring the frequency down, so you probably just picked up Radio 4 or a local taxi service. So that takes the kind of weird occult thing out of it. I believe him, certainly. So on to this. I'll show this one first. The other thing which has come up recently, which I found really very, very exciting, was making field recordings. You probably noticed that one of the albums I've got was called The Seance at Hobbs Lane. There's a Hob Moor in York. I was down giving a talk there, and someone took me to it. And you walk up to Hob Moor, you go up Hob Lane. So I, immediately started recording everything. And then I had this idea of taking something from the actual place, again onto tape. And so something from the actual place affects the cassette tape. So this is just a mock-up to give you an idea. But as the tape would go round, the actual stone would affect it. It would destroy it eventually. So you let it go a little bit and then see what's happened. This is other stuff from. Believe me, there is a cassette tape in there somewhere. This is Flora and Fauna from Hogmoor as well. That's in the windowsill at home. And it's this idea that. What's the last one? This is. Is there sound coming out?
Yeah,
right.
It's like an airplane.
Yeah. So this is the idea that the. Oh yes, it's the. This hasn't been interfered with yet, but it will be. So you're picking up bird song. There's a primary school at the end of it. There's trains going past. All sorts. Oh dear. Right. Right, I'll leave on that image. Oh yes, if you could, thanks. This is I will be reading from notes because I can never remember the exact details of this. In the late 1920s, the German engineer Fritz Flimmer was experimenting with a revolutionary process for recording sound. Remember, it was only towards the end of the 19th century that it was even possible to have sound recorded. Until then, the sound recorded, the sound would have lived or faded in a performance. Developing on the earlier wire and wax cylinder recorders, Flimmer coated the thinnest paper he could find. In this case, it was cigarette paper, with iron oxide powder, and he fixed it with lacquer. The experiments were successful, and in 1928 he patented his invention for magnetic recording tape. So it would have been a bigger tape, it would have been about this size. Iron oxide in its natural state is known as magnetite, a mineral that was used in alchemy and is said to have strange powers. It's said that it can absorb surrounding energies, and we've got some at home, and it affects compasses. A more ancient name for magnetite is lodestone, which was the name of the group that started the whole tape loop thing, so that's another. So the idea of that I've been doing is investigating the idea that sound captured on magnetic tape can establish time as a substance, as a matter, something that's malleable, and it can be reconfigured, manipulated, and particles of sound rearranged to reveal their DNA, the building blocks, their essence. That's why in my current experiments I've deliberately placed site-specific recordings on cassette in close proximity from the place that they were recorded. So I haven't got a slide of this, but I've got recordings. I'm going to sound like a complete lunatic. I've made recordings at Thomas de Quincey's grave in Edinburgh, and soil and moss from the grave are in test tubes at home with length of tape, and they've been jammed in. I'm going to leave them a year. The tape recorded at Hog Moor is at the moment sharing a Victorian medicine bottle filled with grasses. You saw the slide. And it's this notion that these collected materials will in fact affect the oxide on the tape, and therefore it will transform it into something else. So that's kind of what I'm about, but I always like to finish with a good quote. We've got something from Nikola Tesla, the inventor. He said, "If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency and vibration." And the final quote is from Sir James George Fraser in The Golden Bough, which is a kind of occult folklore. Everyone's got a copy of it. And he says this in 1922. "Even in our own day, a great religious writer, himself deeply sensitive to the witchery of music, has said that musical notes, with all their power to fire the blood and melt the heart, cannot be mere empty sounds and nothing more. No, they have escaped from some higher sphere. They are the outpourings of eternal harmony, the voice of angels, and it is thus that the rude imaginings of primitive man were transfigured." Thank you.
Thank you, John Mulholland. So will you join me here in a little sitting here? So, well, I'd love to have you as a DJ one night. It would be wonderful to have you over. First of all, I was really triggered by your little warning about psychographical walks. Just go home and do the dishes, and don't linger too long in that sphere.
Yeah.
Why this warning?
Because, as I said, a lot of people would read too much into it, and they would take it very much on board that the message to them, which is dangerous. The very first day I got my fellowship in the psychology department to research psychogeography, I went out for a walk, and I came to the crossing at Cambridge Street, and this man came up beside me on his mobile phone, and he said, "Just wandering around, I like the sound of that." You know, and he was whoever he was saying it to, but it's that coincidence, and if I wasn't tuned into psychogeography, I wouldn't have even picked that up. Uh-huh. So you do start to become aware. You know, it's like William Burroughs, when he, this famous story about William Burroughs, when he lived in London, he used to go to the Mocha Cafe every day, and it was run by his family run, and it was very pleasant, it was good food, and the prices were affordable. And then it was sold to someone else, and the prices went up, the staff became very rude, you know, the food wasn't as good, and he complained, and he was basically thrown out. And what he did to get his revenge was he walked up and down the street and recorded the normal sound of the street, went home and spliced into it sounds of machine guns, people screaming, fire engines, explosions, but at the same level. And he walked up and down the street. So people wouldn't really notice whether someone playing a really loud cassette. It was the same audible level as normal sounds would be. Mm-hmm. 3 months later, the shop closed, the cafe closed, because no one would get near it. Mm-hmm. But they didn't know why. there was just it was a bad space. So there, we know that as a fact that place did close because no one went in.
Yeah.
It could have been just the bad food or whatever, but the idea that sound can quite literally affect is very, very interesting. So is that part of the thing about, it sounds as though, it's kind of been joking about it, and probably the same with students, but I think it can be, if you're susceptible, then you go, God, I've got this thing, and the next thing you know, it's psychiatric hospital.
Yeah.
Do you think, because you make a lot of transfers, you transfer from an archaeological finding to an experiment with it, and then onto a CD. You transfer the electromagnetic field onto archaeological finds into something. We'll come up to that later. That maybe is music, but probably not. But what is it? When people listen to the things you make, isn't there also a bit of a danger of these leaking or haunting meanings?
I think after I seriously got into psychogeography, the thing with Darren and ontology, it became hauntology. And I thought, God, this sounds great, what is it? Oh, I've been doing that.
Hauntology.
Hauntology.
Yeah.
But it's that sort of, there's another thing I've been aware of. And not really in a kind of socio-political way, but in a creative way. Being aware that places have atmospheres and that there's something else going on other than just what we see here, but I think there could be a danger, I think the kind of stuff that I do and the fact it's never ever going to trouble the charts, some people can latch onto it. So far there's been no stalkers. But I've heard other people do similar stuff. Oh God, this is it's attracting. It's plugging into something that some people will react to, and it might not necessarily be the most healthy thing. But as we were saying earlier about the psychogeography, there is psycho at the beginning, which is obviously there for psychology, but there is that kind of edgy thing. I've done interviews with people. I did one when I got my fellowship in psychology department at Glasgow Cali. Did an interview for Radio Scotland, and the interviewer was just said a lot of nonsense, isn't it? Kind of, convince me kind of thing. And by the end of it, she wanted to go on a walk. Just to go, make a map and go on a walk.
Yeah.
So she said, is this really a serious academic? I said, yes, it is. You're funded, now and again, to do stuff. And I honestly think it's a lot more, I don't think it'll ever be in the mainstream, but it's more accepted now. Hence Cambridge, hence this.
Yeah.
There's other stuff going on. Everything's kind of coalescing into something, and even with Ghostbox as well, and guys like the Caretaker, those records, fantastic records. There's definitely something in the air, and I don't know if I'm pleased or not with being regarded as the kind of grandfather of all this.
Why not?
I'm terribly old, that's I've been doing it since I was 12. Really, that's when I started. But anyway, it's kind of nice because I've had a couple of students since I've been at Glasgow come up and saying, God, how did you do this? And there was one student who he had a project in mind, and he told me what he was going to do with it. And he said, oh, your stuff's an influence. And I said, no, you're just doing what I did. You've got to find your own thing. And he was like, oh, yeah. He was called Bertie. But yeah, that's...
Did he?
Yeah, he has actually said the disc is done. I haven't heard it yet. Haven't put it on yet. But that's the important thing, because it's like in the 90s, Blur appeared and said, "Oh great, what they like? Oh, they like the Kinks. Well, go and listen to the Kinks then." You've got to keep pushing and doing your own thing.
Is that your mission with your students in Glasgow?
Yeah, kick them. Yeah, I get them to students anyway. Any talks. If a culture or a society stands still and constantly regurgitates, it's going to die. And you've got to keep moving. And that's the brilliant thing about technology coming in. I had a friend in America come over, and he said, "I'm going to play you something. I want you to tell me what it is." And he put this thing on, and we've all heard music all our lives. We've heard sounds all our lives. I had never heard anything like this. And I said, "Right, this is great. What is it?" And his wife's a singer. And what he did was, she was giving a concert, and he recorded her speaking to the audience. And he took all those little bits, stuck them together, and originally it was about 20 seconds, and he stretched it to 78 minutes. And it was epiphany for me, because you're hearing the particles of sound, and that's, everything's getting stretched.
Yeah. How did knowing what it was change your listening experience?
It didn't really, because I loved the fact that I did kind of press him quite a bit. I said, "You've got to tell me how you did this. What is it?" Because I don't recognise any instrumentation, because it was the process that was the thing that was exciting about it. And eventually he told me, but it didn't really change it, because again, the thing we were saying earlier on, about we can't listen to music the way people that don't make records can listen to it. So we're constantly going, it's like we've sat at home watching films, and a guitar comes along, Fender Strat, through a Vox amp. We can't help it. And it's I suppose that's the price that we pay for being able to make records or make recordings. We give up that this is entertainment or whatever it is. Yeah.
So, what did you learn through this whole process from 12 years on until now about listening?
I think it was that part. I still don't know what Paulo Oliveira's called deep listening. I don't know. It might be what I'm trying to talk about. Again, it was listening to, like, my friend Paul, who kind of got out of making those tapes and would just listen to music as a fan. I would constantly say to him, "Yeah, on this Pink Floyd track, just after the organ comes in, there's something in the background behind it. What is that?" And he's just leave it. But I couldn't. It's that researcher in me, even at that age, go, "What's making that sound? How are they doing that?" So I think I've always kind of had it. But again, it's that thing of realising when you get older and you start doing this stuff, going, "Oh, right. I've been into psychogeography all my life. I've been into ontology. I've been, right. This is all kind of, everything's kind of coming together." And that's, the main thing for me, in a very practical sense, was getting composer in residence at Glasgow. Because I'd contacted them about doing just a talk on psychogeography. And, that day someone was looking after me, because the guy that I sent it to, my proposal to, had my albums. And he said, "Are you a Mulholland musician?" I said, "I've got your albums. Get up here." And we got a Leverhulme fellowship, so that validated it, But it was just one of those moments, everything lined up. I remember saying to him, he said, "Would you like to be our composer in residence?" I said, "I'm going to have to think about it." "Yes." And that was it. That was it. Yeah.
So your students, do you have to teach them listening to the things you make, or don't they need any training?
No, I mean, it hasn't really. I haven't. If I lecture in
like this,
or I do talks just on psychogeography, or how to make music from a graphic score, things like that. That are usually based on, at the moment, alchemy and the occult. I've done a couple of them. But usually if I'm talking to students about it, we don't actually listen to anything. It's, give me the ideas. We can get the house built after we figure out where the bricks are going to go. That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's always a good way to start. Discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
And then see what they've got and try not to interfere. There's always that thing of musicians. You go, oh, you could put some reverb, but no, let's leave it. I've played on people's albums that, they'll say, right, it starts like this, here's 4 chords on a Fender Telecaster, and then it stops, and then it comes in with distortion in the drums. No, what you want to do is, no, I'm just playing.
Yeah.
So you can't help that, So, but with this kind of stuff, I always just get the ideas from them first, and even point them in the direction of what Ian Sinclair, or loads of older books that fortunately are available on Amazon for like a penny. Tons of great books on the occult. They're very cheap, and they talk about music as well and sound. One particular history of magic and stuff like that. So one thing does tend to spark another. That's a
Is there an ideal way of listening? Is there a way to learn deep listening?
To be honest, I think it's either in you or not. If you've got the passion for it and the desire for it, you're halfway there. To be honest, I think I don't know, because if you were to suddenly, if you were interested in it, then as I say, you're halfway there. But if you take someone cold and say, now you're going to learn how to deep listen, it's just a bus going past. It's just people talking in the street, So, I would say, if you're keen, you could just really sit down and use your ears.
Yeah. Maybe there's some questions from the audience.
You were warning us for what might happen if you listen too carefully to things, but is there also, or do you have any experience of a healing quality of sounds?
Sorry, healing?
A healing quality.
A healing quality?
Yes.
I'll repeat it. Do you have any experience with the healing quality of sound?
Only yeah. Actually, there's something, I won't go into too many details, but there's a piece of music I wrote. There's a piece of music I wrote that was on the Norwood Variations record, string quartet piece, that it was personally very, very cathartic. And that's something I wrote myself to get very kind of negative emotions out. And when we came to record it, we rehearsed and with a break, and the second violinist came up to me and said, "That's really intense." I was like, "Yeah." He said, "What's that about?" I was like, "I'm not telling you." I couldn't. But that, in a way, is healing. Other pieces of music, personally, I find it not so much healing, but very, very exciting. I mean, one of the things, again, in a way, it's good to be 55 years old because you've got history. Someone said, what were the earliest records that influenced you? So I really had to think. And one of the first ones, certainly in terms of electronic music, was the soundtrack to A Clockwork Orange, which we had the records and we had the book. Of course, we couldn't see the film. So you'd imagine all sorts, especially there's a really fantastic track called Tiny Steps, which is pure electronics. And there's rhythm, and thinking, well, that's not a drummer playing, what's the synthesizer through a low frequency oscillator? Right, okay, so that leads you. So I say for me, the power of it is to open doors, is to show you the low door in the wall. It's that kind of thing. So the only kind of healing thing I would say for me would be that particular track called Sycamore that I wrote. So yeah, that's all.
Yeah, you showed us a picture of the Gladny. It was not you wrote down Gladny, but it was Gladny. Ernst Gladny from Switzerland.
Yes.
So you showed me the pictures, and I was wondering because Mr. was talking about the healing properties maybe of sound. What can it do? So I was wondering, what does that mean to you? Like if you have a certain frequency and you have this copper plate and you put the dust on it, and then some kind of geometric pattern appears.
Yes.
And if you change the pitch, you go up and down,
Yeah.
and then different shapes.
Yeah, well, they're very, very intricate.
Yeah. So I mean, what does this kind of approach
Well,
to sound or to music? Because I don't really understand all this. What is sound and what is music?
Well, you know, if you look up the dictionary definition of what sound is, it's vibration in the air.
Yeah.
You know, but one of the things that I would start to think about was I read that the part of the brain that deals with processing music is right next to the part that deals with emotion and memory. So that is obviously your brain's a physical thing. It's matter. It's malleable. So if there's vibrations, what is it doing? You know, but that's another course of research I'd have to get into. Although saying that, I have borrowed the brain from the university. It's sitting on the shelf in my study. Oh, it's a plastic brain. Yeah. And it comes apart. I've never put it together successfully again. Yeah, it is a plastic brain. So I think that there's obviously something that you know, where does, you know, you can listen to you play an A major on a piano and move to one note and it's a minor, and suddenly it feels, you know, from major to minor, it suddenly feels melancholy. You feel sad, but it's just literally vibrations in the air that you're hearing. So what is that? And that's the thing, taking it from music and melody, putting it into field recordings or found sound, whatever. It's then something else. It is this deep listening, what, you know, that I mentioned earlier. It's even something really simple like hearing on the Hall Moor recording, hearing the school kids and bird song. That could trigger a memory for someone, you know, or the train going past. The trains used to go past the back of our house all the time, and something that's very evocative for me is the sound of a British Rail Class 27 locomotive. Seriously, because it goes at a certain pitch, and one of them is on my next record. I found a recording online, and it's I've got a friend who's obsessed with trains, and all those trains in Britain now are mostly gone. But my friend Mark, he can that's a Class 8 shunter, that's a Class 22. You know, he's right all the time. So again, he's even in Mark's way that we probably didn't realise, he's associated place and memory with a particular sound as well, with that, because behind us it was all shunting yards and you hear them all the time. So, and now it's completely overgrown with nature, so it's become something else now. So it's the idea that not just music can be evocative, but sound as well. So that's why I'm getting really interested in field recording.
So is there in that sense there's no real distinction between sound and music in that respect?
No, not now. It's anything to.
So what's the difference for you when because you compose in your own, you just devise your own process for composing?
Yeah, because I've been very, very fortunate because commissions I've got. In fact, the last one, the one before was for Edinburgh University, and it was to celebrate the centenary of educational psychologist, and they did a big exhibition in the archive, and I was called in to do 2 pieces of music. So I read all the archive papers and the photographs and all this, and I phoned them and said, right, I've got 2 ideas. I want to do a cello duet, and I want to. It was his office was there's 4 or 5 people in it, and one of them was to process statistics, so it's numbers, and they had this fantastic machine that was built in the 30s, it's like a typewriter, but it was all numbers and could do all these different equations and things. most amazing thing. And they found the actual one from his office, and they restored it so it looked brand new. And I said to them, right, what I want to do is record the sound of the facet machine. What? He said, but it's just like a typewriter. I said, just let me do it. And I put a contact mic on it and recorded all the sounds from it. And even the fellow that restored it, he didn't realise it had a bell inside it. That the bell was part of the cylinder that was inside, and it dinged. So we took all the sounds from that and turned it into this track. And it was when they were preparing for the opening of the exhibition, they played the track over the PA, and the guy that commissioned me said, can't play that, it'll terrify people. He said, I love Throbbing Gristle, I love this. He says, but no, we want people
There's
to
a ghost in that machine.
Yeah, in a way. And it's quite scary. But you never guess it was this very innocent looking little, you know. But again, it's taking that and doing something with it. So he gave me permission to have that on the next album as well.
Hello, I'm wondering if you could elaborate more on your interest of reconstructing or deconstructing or redeconstructing field recordings. Because it looks like all the things you collect are sort of in the form of evidence, or they're sort of truthful in, if you would say, even, and then you go through the process of like altering them completely. I was wondering if you can elaborate on your process.
Well, it's that thing about, it seems very grand, but you know, what is truthful? Because you could have been standing beside me when, let's say, did the whole Moore recording, and if I was to say to you, right, we've got this recording, you can hear it in a minute, what did you hear? And you might not have heard the train going past, or someone shouting, or whatever. So the document, the evidence of it would be the untouched, clean recording. And it's, if I choose to edit at 3 seconds and cut out the next 17 seconds and join those 2 sections up, that's me putting my take on it of what it could be. Now, the reason I did those recordings, I mean, I'd probably have done them anyway, but the fact that I got up early and ran up to the place was the fact it was called Hall. And it was a big influence on the Seattle Hall Line album. So I immediately had brought my own take on it, and let's get this place recorded. And so, if you had gone up on the same day, and you'd taken a recording at the same time, your version would have been different from mine. You know, so it's taking something and running with it. I think that's the important way of approaching this kind of thing.
It's interesting because it sounds a bit like forensic research.
Yeah.
Right? You by processing raw material, there's new knowledge that you create.
Well,
are you interested in the knowledge itself, or are you interested in more in the process?
Perception of it. Both. I mean, one of the, again, back to William Burroughs. Anthony, you were talking about Genesis Peorage and Throbbing Gristle. One of the times that Genesis visited William Burroughs in London, the post had just arrived, and it was a letter from William Burroughs' lawyer. And he was very famous for doing the cut-ups. He would cut up text and make a new work out of it. And he opened the letter up and he looked at it and he said to Genesis, right, let's see what it really says. And he folded the letter over and cut down at the stand money and reconfigured it. And the one phrase that kept coming, one word that kept coming out all over, money, 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 receipt, cash. And so it's that kind of digging in, and of course that's what it was all about.
It's deep cutting and deep reading. Yeah.
Deep lawyers. But it is that kind of, again, it ties in, it connects with psychogeography, it connects with cutting up tape loops. You know, it's all, they're not separate at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, really. And when I read the thing about Burroughs walking up and down with the tape recorders, it's just so obvious.
Yeah.
But how many people that would have frequented that place and didn't go and didn't realise that it might be to do with a famous American junkie writer? You know, basically, you know, as they put it, grandly, but it's great, tearing up reality. Because that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing with perception, and that's kind of what I'm interested in. And I feel, I was saying to my wife, I feel that the talk that I did today is getting closer and closer and closer to what the essence of what I do is. I mean, I still talk about psychogeography to students and things, but this is getting closer to what, you know. But I know there isn't an answer, there isn't a formula that will be presented with, you know, by Ian Sinclair. But it can't end. You know, when I go at my psychogeography, hauntology, whatever will end, but it will this constant movement, because life, the universe, is Tesla said, you know, it's out there in vibration, it's out there in frequency. It'll never end. So that's what's I love doing it.
Well, the story of William Burroughs reminded me of the way people in the town of Sipson above Heathrow Airport have become relatively more depressed because of the sound damage this airport is causing. Do you think that your field of research has anything related to solving a problem like that, which is sort of the presence of noise pollution?
I think it could do. That's an interesting question. One of the only the other day, where we live, we look onto a railway, and it's all trees, and which baffles some of the sound. And the trees have got to cut the ways for a new fence they're putting. And I was talking to someone from Network Rail, who is a company that deals with the railways in Britain. I said, have you heard of the acoustic footprint? No. And I said, well, it's the distance you get from a sound source that you can't hear it anymore. And I said, even though there's winter time elves and all the leaves are gone, but I said, when the trees are up, they do baffle that sound. It will start to affect people, because the trains are running every 10 minutes or something. So, you know, the idea of maybe having speakers up with extra bird song on it or something, you know, it's something that seems positive rather than just this, you know, personal like sound of trains, but, you know, it's that kind of thing you see about Heathrow. If maybe the sub could be some way to deflect that might be a gig for me. See what he's saying. But yeah, and the idea of sounds being a depressing thing, the relentless droning, you know, yeah, it's interesting. And of course it would have an effect in the real world, but house prices would go down. You know, things like that. People can sell their houses. Maybe there's not so many shops about there now because, you don't know. But yeah, the whole noise pollution thing is obviously it's getting bigger and bigger.
Are you as a deep listener affected by noise pollution, or is everything as interesting for a guy like you?
Noisy
neighbours, industrial noise.
No, it's stuff like that. I think my basic thing is, if someone's doing something like, you know, if there's a train going past or, you know, stuff, but if it's things like people letting off fireworks at midnight, that annoys me. Or if it's people digging the road up, well, what the fuck do they do? That's a problem. But if someone doing something inconsiderate, you know, like really noisy student neighbours, for instance, that's a problem. But other stuff, I mean, it'd be silly to go, I'm really angry at thundercloud. It's ridiculous. So things like, you know, mostly anything kind of natural is, or even industrial is open. You know, it's a question.
Yeah, I never heard the term psychogeography before, so I was wondering, could you just give me a short definition of how you define it?
Well, I was going to repeat what Guy Debord said about it. Guy Debord was a French philosopher, and he started this group called the Lettrists, and then the Situationists. And he defined psychogeography as being the way that the environment can affect your mood and behaviour, and I think memory as well. And it's just how we deal with the urban environment. In his time, that's how he regarded it. But I think with field recordings, it can definitely go into rural as well. It's got its own whole field, literally field, that's absolutely worth investigating.
So you're thinking of geography as the whole scenario, it's sight, sound, all your sensory.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, this thing that I said about crossing the road, someone would say, just wandering about, I like the sound of that. You would pick that up if you're in that particular state of mind, whereas most of the time you wouldn't. What's the difference between just going for a walk and going on a drift, which is a psychogeographical walk? It's simply because you get to that state of mind where you're open to things. That's why when I did the walk with the students, I thought this would be interesting because this is a group of people rather than just me going out and walking. And things like just chance things. There's the 18th century painter Lloyd Bogart, an engraver. He had this joke that he played, and it was he did a self-portrait, and on the palette of the portrait he drew this line, this kind of serpentine line, and he said it was the line of grace and of beauty. And all these art critics were going, what's this? And then started to notice that in his prints, the line would appear in the folded curtains, or it would appear in a book line open, or and it would always be there. So they were. He said that it caused as much interest as Egyptian hieroglyphics at that time because there was a stone hadn't been discovered, and so everyone was like, oh, so that was kind of interesting. And then I discovered there was a park in the East End of Glasgow, and in the middle of it there's a ziggurat that had been built from the stones of the old railway. So they've taken the stones from another location and built this ziggurat. So what I did was, I haven't done this walk yet, but I've mapped it out. I took the line of grace and beauty and I put it, the starting point to be the top of this ziggurat. And I put the line down on the map and I followed it with my finger and it finished on the street that my mum grew up in the East End. That's kind of interesting. Of course, I could have used this in a different size of map. I could have had the line at a different size. I could have moved it in a different direction, but just the chance of it landing there. A couple of weeks later, I was moving house and I found a book one of my aunts gave me that I was very close to. And it was about the voyage of the Kon-Tiki, Thor Heyerdahl's journey. And in the back of the book, there was the route that they went. And she bought this book for me second hand from this shop across the road from her house. And this shop was a second hand book lending library and tobacconists. And there's all sorts of strange things. So I got the map out again and I took the route of the Kon-Tiki voyage. And I followed it down and stopped at the house where my dad was born. So it's that sort of, if I did read too much into it, you'd think there's messages coming from somewhere. But it's just coincidence.
You just went on to wash the dishes.
I went on to wash the dishes. Then I probably did wrong and had to read it again. So you've got to come back. That's a classic example of you could go a bit crazy with it. I could walk that line and it's a line from something my aunt gave me that I was close to, and ended up, at the house that my dad grew up in. So it's good to discover that, but because I've been kind of trained as a researcher, I can put it in the drawer and go, right, that's interesting, that's good fun, that'll be a hilarious anecdote for a talk someday. And leave it at that.
Yeah.
So.
All these.
You were just talking about reading into things too much, or
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe this is me doing that, but I've been wondering this entire time, for someone so conscious of sounds, I almost feel like I'm watching a performer, and I'm wondering, how do you see the performative quality of you as a composer and of your works? Because I don't know, probably other people have noticed this as well. You seem to have a sort of ritual with your microphone.
Combing your hair.
And I was wondering if this is conscious. If this is a conscious idea of how we now as a group hear you. That's his nervous. But it really makes something complete, it makes something performative out of it.
That's interesting. I do usually sit like this.
Yeah,
I don't usually hold microphones, so I don't know. Maybe there is something to it.
But in relation
I'm
to
really
that,
conscious of this now.
how do you see the performativity of your works, of your pieces?
Sorry, I don't really understand.
What the performative quality of your pieces is. You started with them as field geographically and field recordings, but then turning them into a work. What then happens afterwards, and how do you see the context for that?
Oh, I see. Well, they usually go into an album. There hasn't been any. I don't know last time I did a gig. So I don't really. I mean, where does the recording go? But it is going to an album. That would be all. I'd like to do some installations though.
It doesn't really seem to interest you where the recording eventually lands.
No. Because
Why?
I've never sat at home and thought, well, I put the Who on, or I'll put on my records on those. You know, or I'll put the Sex Pistols or whoever. It doesn't, it's what I do, it's done and it's away. As I said to someone earlier, and I'll go back up here, one night my wife did a quiz with me and asked me 10 questions about my own work, and I got 1 out of 10. Was it 1?
Yeah.
I just not really. I don't see it as part of it, and it's bizarre because I do have this kind of archival thing, but I don't even have all my own records. You know, it's to get some of those images off the net for album covers. So it just doesn't really. I don't want to be terribly arty or anything, or all that stuff, but I throw so much into it that I've got to move on to something else. You know?
Suppose a publisher would say, well, now we're going to make the complete works of Drew Mulholland. What? Of course, you maybe make a little money out of it, but what would that mean to you?
And so everything's going to be published. Well, to be honest, I think a musicologist could probably sit down and see a thread going right through from string quartets to choral works to abstract noise to guitar pieces to krautrock. You know, all that stuff. There probably is a thread that goes through it all. The one thing I did find really interesting when we did the Norwood record, to get kind of press release together. And of course I couldn't really remember anything. So I looked up a lot of stuff online, and there was a thread that spoke about the sense of humour in the records, which is interesting because there's obviously no jokes there. There's no text. There's no singing. There's no lyrics. So what is it? I don't know. I mean, not with every record, but there was this thing kept coming up, this sense of humour.
You would actually need a psychogeographer to go through your work.
Yes. And tell me about it.
Yeah.
Maybe I can get that time the next time.
Yeah, I listened to some pieces this afternoon, and you also play guitar, and you have the Gibson SG, and so you know and a Telecaster and whatever.
Do you see that thing?
So I mean,
Twitter?
you never perform like in industrial environments or like live acting or whatever, that you are interested yourself in how the guitar or how you as a musician composer interact with the environment.
Yeah, and there definitely is that sense of being an observer, you know, of being somehow a part. So you have the experience, you take the recordings, and then you go away and do something with it, rather than. I mean, there's a record that hasn't come out yet. It's some of the things I photographed. I went around Scotland and photographed a lot of the First and Second World War pillboxes, bunkers, decoy sites that are usually in the middle of nowhere and they're crumbling away. These things are 70, 80 years old now, and 100 years old, First World War stuff. And I did this very long guitar track layered with earphone guitars, and it was an SG on that. And that was reacting essentially to the memory I had of travelling to these places, but also the photographs. So, I mean, one of the things that ties into what you're asking was Adrian Utley from Portishead is a big fan of noisy guitars, and we did a gig together in Scotland, in Stirling, at this festival. Just two very noisy, screaming feedback guitars. And what we wanted to do was, when the British troops were training for D-Day, the government built a facsimile of the German defences on the hills above Stirling. And what we wanted, so it's this huge, it's 200 foot long concrete wall. It's 200 foot long, 10 foot high, and 9 feet thick. And they practiced, training on it. So there's a lot of bullet holes on it, and still bits of barbed wire coming out. And what Adrian and I wanted to do was stand at the end of the wall with a row of Marshall Stacks amplifiers and just really go for it. And we were convinced we were going to get allowed to do films, and health and safety were all over it. And someone from the festival said, "You do realise there's still live ammunition in the ground?" So we weren't allowed to do this, we had to do it on stage. But that was definitely a case of that. We were absolutely up for doing this, because they said, "Look, we'll hire any equipment you want." I said, "Right, we need how many martial arts can go on 200 foot? And about 40 amps or something." So that was one thing that we would have done. And it's not something that I'd be against. Absolutely not.
But do you then go to your studio and manipulate the sounds?
No, something like that I wouldn't probably do anything with. I would just have a live thing. Like I was saying, before the end of the 19th century, the performance was it, then it was away. So I'd probably do that to have a really site-specific memory and musical, not interpretation, but interaction with it. So,
but do you want to change something, by doing that? Like sort of breaking through a wall or changing the site by your recording?
You mean the German defences?
Yes, or the sites, the bunkers you go to?
Not really. I think it's very much like you instill the 12-year-old child in and go, "I'm on a wall playing against." It's that sort of thing. It can be very cerebral, but there's sometimes you just want to walk out. That's the thing. You don't want to be completely academic all the time. You just got to get a guitar on and thrash it. Sadly, it's a part of me that's never matured.
Or happy.
I have a different question. I'm a cultural geographer and I studied in France.
Oh, yeah.
And we, in French, geography is very close to the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned a lot about observation. And we worked a lot with mental maps. When you ask, simple example, you ask a group of children, how do you walk to school?
Yeah.
They don't choose the most safe way, because the less safe way, there was a candy shop.
Yeah.
So, but there we worked a lot on how your memories or your preferences influences the things you see.
Yes.
The things they draw.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, you talk a lot about sounds which are evoking memories.
Mm-hmm.
In which way do you also think about memories or the way you grow up that influences what you hear? And
well, there was, I don't know if this will directly answer your question, but there was a very strange thing that happened to me late 80s, and there was a independent group called the Mighty Lemon Drops, and they had this song called Like an Angel, and I think they were okay, I went to see them live, okay, but right at the end of the song, the 3 notes played on guitar, dun, dun, dun. And the moment I heard it, I was suddenly back at the back door of one of my aunt's houses, looking down the garden up to the railway embankment, and it was quite visceral. And I just thought, right, okay, academic hat on, what happened there? Because it was so unexpected, and I thought the only way I can place it is maybe there was a song playing on the radio when I was standing, because I used to play the back door all the time, and it was just that same phrase. That's because you do like to tend to put things in boxes and make sense of them. Maybe it was something like that. So the idea of placing memory, because it was so specific. I could have closed my eyes and absolutely seen, the gardens, the railway embankment. It was quite uncanny. But I think I'm less susceptible to that kind of thing now because this is what I do, and I don't want to cross the line and be, oh, this is what it means. Hopefully tonight it will be what you get from it. If anything, it will be this stuff is out there. It's great. Enjoy. I'm not going to say that here's the answer to this, and this is why this happens. It's a constantly evolving thing. If that helps.
It would be interesting to have a map of where did you made which sound.
Because the other thing.
Or as an academic, I think that would be interesting because that tells something about the sound of the world you lived in.
Yeah, and there's actually.
You have a map like that? Could you
yeah,
make one?
easily? But the other thing, the thing that used to get me a lot was smell. So smell would be incredibly lost. It's like I'm not sure to talk about it. Proust. The Madeleine biscuit and the tea. Instantly you're off somewhere else, and it always comes at unexpected times. That's the thing. It used to happen to me quite a lot, not so much in the last 10 years. Which I put down to, in fact, it's just kind of what I'm doing. So it's that kind of balance between getting excited about it, which is great, and then codifying it to a certain extent, and then being evangelical about it.
So, most of the grandfathers of psychogeography seem to have been loners. Flaneur, you can be a group of flaneurs. You have to do it on your own. Does that also mean that this whole process of associations is something that you could only do on your own, or is there also a social aspect to it?
Well, as I said, we went to students for that walk. Did I mention anything about that in the math?
No.
Was that just a
No.
Right, I did a series of 3 lectures at the University of Glasgow, and as soon as class came in, and they were all strangers, I had a piece of paper and a pencil on all the desks, and I said to them, right, I don't want you to think about this, draw a map from your childhood. Now, and so they all drew these maps, and I took them off them and put them in a drawer. And when it came to the break in the last lecture, I said, right, what we're going to do with those maps is we're going to join each of them up, and we're going to walk that route, because there was a route going through it when we got all the pieces together. So we'd got 23 different maps, all line drawings of the house, the shops, whatever. And we joined them up, and we went on a walk based on this memory map from all these students. And
A walk through Glasgow.
yeah, I walked through Glasgow from university, and we ended up in a lane that's off of one of the arterial roads in Glasgow, Great Western Road. And we've been talking about Gérard de Nerval, the French symbolist poet. And when he was found, he was hung, they don't know if he hung himself or was hung from a lamppost. He was found by the police in the early morning, and there was a crow circling him. And it sounded phonetically in French as though the crow was saying, here he is, just going round and round. And so that's what we're talking about before we went out for the walk. And we got into this lane, and one of the students came up to me and said, that wasn't there when I came down here to come to the lecture, and there's a stencil of a giant crow. You know, so it's, maybe it was there and she didn't notice it, you know, there's some kind of thing going on there. But to answer the question, it was, I think the ideal thing is to do it by yourself. And if you are going to go in a group, you're still going as a group of individuals. Because someone could pass something that is of significance for them, but not for someone else. But I think to have that focus, because if you're in a social group, you can't help but pick up cues from other people or whatever. So I think it's possible, but I think it's more difficult. I would say it's more difficult in a group, but it's still possible.
It's possible, but it's psychogeography isn't social in itself.
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't say. I mean, again, that's what
it's for loners.
Yeah, it's for sad, sad ones. It's open to everyone.
Yeah, if you make those field recordings in sound geographical environments, then you finish the recordings, you go to the studio, and then you start composing or manipulating the recordings itself. Is there a roof or a frontier, or how far can you stretch this? For example, you gave an example about the lady. She talked for 20 seconds and ended up in a recording of 78 minutes. You know? I mean, how important is this relationship between the sounds of the environment itself and you as a composer manipulating?
Well, I think that's part of the thing that you put into yourself, because my friend Jake, who's stretched that, why did he pick those particular moments in that order? Why did he stretch it to 78 minutes? Why not 41 minutes? So I think that's where you come in. You're making those editorial decisions. You're making decisions if you're going to have any loops in it. What are you going to loop? Where are they going to come in? How are they going to interfere with each other? When you've got two loops going round, something else is created in the middle of that. Do you then take that and so I think that's where you come in as a writer or a composer. That's the decisions you make. And those decisions will be made from your experience, what's pleasing to you, whether you've got a tape or past 17 minutes, it's all that stuff.
I had a question about the emotional implication of the work. For example, the first sound that you showed us were recordings that you made in your childhood, so they had sort of an emotional baggage with it.
Yes.
Have you ever thought or tried to elaborate to convey this emotional baggage to the listener in this case?
No.
But don't you think it's important?
No. I feel like the fact is that I think it's detrimental. Because if I was going heavy again, if I was to say these are like the recordings I made with my friend Paul, who's now dead because he became an alcoholic, because he was probably abused by a priest. Whoa, that's too much information. Because you then will have that information and you will process that through your own way of looking at it. So, as I say, my job is to kind of get the stuff and then you go.
But I'm not talking very much about information, but so not through information, so not telling about the story, but through the sound itself. So through the manipulation of the sound itself. So having something that it's not actually conscious, but it's actually subconscious. So doing a manipulation of the sound that somehow conveys the same feeling or the same kind of memory that that it's very tight with that recording. So not something telling me about or telling us about the life of your friend, but conveying more on a subconscious level.
Yes. Well, one of the things on the first ever record I did, and I thought this kind of got me thinking. There's a track on my first ever record that was, I basically came up with this riff on a bass guitar when I was in a punk group, and it's this really atonal, dreary non-tune called Feldspar, and it made it onto the first album I did, and it was played to two very genteel older ladies in their late 70s, and one of them said to me, that last track, I found it really suffocating. I thought, really? It reminds me of being trapped in a cave, which is where Feldspar appears. So I thought, that's interesting. She got this really, so I think that there's absolutely a subconscious case. I didn't sit down and think, I'm going to write a really dreary non-tune to, trying to be feeling you're trapped or suffocating. But she got that from it. So why did I choose the title Feldspar? It's an area for that leads to more questions. I think definitely. And I was saying to someone earlier, that again, the same first record. It was reviewed in the Wire magazine, and the chap that reviewed it, David Keenan, was in London, and he said to me, I really love the record. He said, it reminds me of where I grew up. He said, I grew up in an area in Glasgow called Mount Vernon. And I said, I said, your dad's Tommy Keenan, isn't it? Yeah. I said, you lived across the road from me when you were a little boy. Hang on, and it really reminded him, when he didn't know who I was or anything, it reminded him of the little estate that he grew up in. It was very, very peculiar. So when he came up from London, I said, well, I don't have to give you directions how to get out to the house, so he came out. But the interesting thing about that was, where David's bedroom was, at the end of his garden was an electricity generator that hummed in this drone at 440 hertz. And David's really into drone music. So I said, could be, because he would have gone to bed and every night he would have heard, that was a lullaby.
Is this why you're so fascinated by the occult?
Well, the thing about the occult is a lot of people, there was mainland Europe, but in Britain we still have this thing of Hammer horror films and the devil appearing at a cupboard or whatever it is. But of course the occult, it is something obscure, something that's hidden, like alchemical text in the 14th, 15th century. That's what interests me, sacred geometry, stuff like that. It's not good and evil or anything, not at all.
It's the underlying patterns.
It's underlying patterns.
There's a world behind the world that we see here.
What's really going on? It's like when Boris says, is that what?
Yeah.
Is that, we know there's something else going on. What is it?
Yeah.
And I absolutely feel now that sound is a good way very good way of investigating that.
Yeah. I have another question about the tapes, because the technology you use, ranging from the Gibsons and the old tapes, this is very tangible technology, but of course technology like this is becoming less and less tangible. You can open it, but you can't really manipulate it anymore. What does that mean for your procedures, for your fascinations?
Well, the way that the sound is stretched is completely to do with software that we wouldn't even been aware of 20-25 years ago. That it would be possible to take a sound that's 4 seconds long and stretch it for an hour. So it's a new frontier, and that's why I'm not a Luddite. I'm not very good at computers, as you saw earlier, but this is fantastic. Again, you mentioned it's really forensic. Can be getting into this. One of the things that I was talking to Anthony earlier about this recordings I found of past life hypnotic regression from the 1970s. It was on flexi discs, And
What are flexi discs for
There's
the
one
younger
local for
audience?
also, it's basically a flexi disc is a record recorded, grooved into a piece of plastic that's usually square that you can actually do this with. And it's just like very, very thick paper, but it's plastic. And I found these in the charity shop, these recordings. So I thought, there was a book with it, so I thought maybe these will be funny, because they're from the 70s. It's recorded straight onto cassette and then made onto flexi disc. So this will be hilarious entertainment. It's absolutely terrifying. It's seriously, there was a woman that was put under who claimed she was a little boy in Victorian times who was killed in a fire in an orphanage. And she told the story of all the kids were starving, and the floor was wooden, and the mattresses were made from straw. And they were so hungry, they found a dead bird and tried to cook it. And the flames took over, and they tried to put it out with their mattresses that were made of straw. So all these kids were killed. Allegedly, this woman said this. So we cut the tape off and slowed it down, and we're sitting listening to it. And this part come on that we hadn't been aware of before. Now everything slowed down, backwards, looked, and in the middle of it we just heard, "Help me!" I was over at John's home. So it was just, right, okay, where did that come from? It could just be coincidence or a part of the tape that we missed. I don't know. But it's when things like that happen, whoever valid they are, it takes in a different direction. Right, I'm going to look at reports in the Victorian period of children being killed to see if it's true. But again, it's that kind of thing. You just think, we're going to listen to this for entertainment, because it's obviously nonsense, and then it just becomes something else. Yeah. And that was completely unexpected.
Yeah. Again, a transfer.
Yeah.
So, one last question regarding haunting. Because a few months ago, Avery Gordon was our guest. Do you know?
Yeah.
Avery Gordon, an American sociologist. And she's interested in the political implications of haunting, because she does research, for example, into the history of slavery. Mm-hmm. Because she says the slavery still haunts us in this time.
Talking about Jacques Derrida that way.
Yeah. So she, for her, doing research into haunting is a political act. Yeah. Because in what sense is it political for you, what you are doing?
Well, maybe the past life regression thing I just mentioned. Maybe it can be political in the sense of why were there orphanages that treated children like that? What was the social thing at the time? That's when I said when we listened to it, I thought, how can we find out if the story is true? And then the other question is, well, if we find out it's true that 5,000 children were burned to death in an orphanage, how do we know that the woman who said she was regressed hadn't read that story as well? Mm-hmm. So it's ongoing. So I mean, you could take to the logical conclusion of starting to look at the woman that was put under. Was she fantasist? Just want attention. Well, so it's socially political, I suppose, in that sense. Mm-hmm. But that's an interesting thing for slavery. Mm-hmm. Looking at that, or things like the Berlin Wall. Mm-hmm. The number of people that died. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's no. That's another thing I'm probably obsessed with now. Political hauntings. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's endless. That's what endless. The more you do, the more you find out. The more you do it, the more you find out.
Anything that needs to be said but hasn't been said before? Okay. Then back.
Do you get the physical reaction to sound sometimes? Like, do you get shivers?
Well, some occasions there are, the hairs on the back of the neck go up. One thing that happens it sounds like I'm really plugging my next album, which I am, of course, is that we did, the fellow that narrated the film, John Kavanagh, is an engineer as well, and he engineers most of my records. And we do this thing, we get all the sounds, and we put them on the computer, so they're all underneath each other, and we usually have a look and go, let's do a blind mix, and we just hit play and see what happens. And recently, there was a warm up for a string quartet piece that I'd written, just warming up. That was in the first track. The second track was a similar train, and it was something else. And we just looked at each other. We could have sat down for hours trying to work this out, but it ran for about a minute, and everything just locked in. The train sounded its horn, and in response to that, the oboe that was on the string quartet recording played the octave above it, right on time. So things like that happened, yeah, which is kind of spooky, but interesting. I think for the next record we're going to say it's produced by the Blind Mixers. It's very odd, but good, and that's happened quite a few times. In fact, the Seance of Hotline album, there was all the electronic tracks, and we did it at the same time, and we were all done. It's absolutely complete. So, yeah, it does happen. It's just good.
Looking forward to your complete works.
Arthur, memorable.
Yeah, first of all, yes. Thank you, Drew Mulholland.
Thank you.
And thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you, Stroom, for hosting this, and hope to see you next year. Thank you.